My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm 38 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, and gave enough, my family would finally see my worth. I'm a certified public accountant, successful by most measures, respected in my field, earning a good living. But success in my career never translated to value in my family. I was always the responsible one, the stable one, the daughter who didn't need attention or celebration because I could handle everything on my own. My younger brother David was the star, the investment, the one whose dreams mattered more than mine ever could, and I accepted that for 38 years. I funded it. I sacrificed for it. I made myself smaller so he could shine brighter. Today, I'm standing in my parents' living room at a party celebrating David's promotion to partner at his law firm. There are 40 people here, relatives, family friends, colleagues. And my father just called me useless in front of all of them. I'm holding a folder that contains 15 years of bank statements, promissory notes, and documentation proving I've given my family over $185,000. They don't know I have this. They don't know I've been documenting everything for months. They don't know that today, their public humiliation of me will finally get a response. This is the story of how I got here, and what I did next. I arrived at my parents' house 20 minutes late, coming straight from the office where I'd been finishing tax returns for a major client. And the street was lined with expensive cars, my relatives' vehicles, my parents' friends, people from David's law firm. I parked my 7-year-old sedan at the end of the block, grabbed the leather folder from my passenger seat, and walked toward the house I'd helped pay the mortgage on for 3 years. The folder felt heavy. Inside were documents that represented 15 years of my life compressed into numbers, bank statements, transfer receipts, text messages, emails, a promissory note with my parents' signatures. $185,000 in total. My entire financial history with my family, organized chronologically, highlighted, annotated. I didn't know yet that I'd use it today. But I'd brought it anyway, the way you bring an umbrella when the forecast shows rain. Through the large front windows, I could see the party in full swing. A banner hung across the living room. "Congratulations, David, partner." Catered food covered every surface. People mingled with champagne glasses, laughing, celebrating. My parents stood in the center of it all, looking proud and successful, playing the role of parents who'd raised exceptional children. I opened the front door and slipped inside, hoping to join quietly. But my mother spotted me immediately. Her voice cut through the conversation. "Rebecca, you made it. And only 20 minutes late this time." Several people turned to look. I felt my face flush. "I was finishing work. Of course you were." My father's voice boomed from across the room. He was mid-toast, champagne glass raised, surrounded by a circle of relatives and David's colleagues. Rebecca finally graced us with her presence, late as always. He looked at David, who stood beside him looking mildly uncomfortable. "David, this is why you're successful. You understand priorities." The room laughed. Polite laughter, the kind that acknowledges a joke at someone else's expense without quite endorsing it. I stood in the entryway, clutching my folder, feeling the familiar knot in my stomach. I'd felt that knot since childhood, the physical sensation of being dismissed, of being the footnote in someone else's story. It lived permanently in my gut, tightening whenever I was around my family. My mother approached me, her smile tight and practiced. She was dressed in an expensive outfit I recognized from a boutique I'd passed many times but never entered. Too expensive for my budget, though apparently not for hers. "Rebecca, dear, you look tired. Still doing that number work? Have you finally found a real career, or are you still just doing taxes?" "I'm a CPA, Mom. I've been a CPA for 12 years. "Yes, that's what I said. Numbers." She patted my arm. Come, have some food. Try to socialize. Don't hide in corners like you usually do. I moved deeper into the room, nodding at relatives who offered polite greetings. Rebecca, good to see you. Still with the accounting firm? How's the tax business? Keeping busy? The questions were perfunctory, asked and answered within seconds before attention shifted back to more interesting topics. I watched my father continue his toast. David's achievement today is the culmination of years of hard work, dedication, and the support of family who believed in him. Michelle and I invested everything we had in our children. We sacrificed, we supported, we believed. And seeing David reach this level of success, partner at 35, one of the youngest in his firm's history, it makes every sacrifice worthwhile. The crowd murmured approval. My mother beamed. David looked moved, his wife Michelle standing beside him with their 2 young children. Every sacrifice. I thought about the mortgage payments I'd made when they claimed to be short. The $15,000 I'd given them for my father's pay cut that turned out to be his early retirement. The $52,000 I'd transferred 3 months ago for their debt crisis that was actually credit card bills from vacations and home renovations. The folder in my hands grew heavier. My father continued, his voice growing emotional. You know, we always knew David was special. From the time he was a boy, we could see he had something different. Leadership, charisma, the ability to inspire people. He paused, looking around the room. Some children are just built differently. Then he looked directly at me, and he said it. Let's be honest, Rebecca has always been useless when it comes to real achievement. She's not like David. Some people are just built differently. The word useless hit me like a physical blow. The room went quieter. Several relatives looked uncomfortable, glancing between my father and me. Others nodded as if he'd simply stated an obvious fact. My mother laughed, the sound high and dismissive. Rebecca's always been content with her little numbers job. Not everyone needs to achieve great things. The world needs accountants too. More laughter. Awkward, uncertain, but laughter nonetheless. David looked embarrassed but said nothing. He didn't defend me. He never did. He just stood there, accepting congratulations, letting our father call his sister useless in front of 40 people. I stood frozen, the folder in my hand suddenly feeling like evidence at a trial. Because that's what it was. 15 years of proof that my usefulness was measured entirely by my bank account, that my worth to this family was calculated in dollars transferred, emergencies funded, dreams sacrificed. I thought about my apartment, modest, small, the same one I'd lived in for 8 years while my peers bought houses and started families. I thought about the townhouse I'd been weeks away from buying before I gave them my entire savings. I thought about every promotion I'd earned that was acknowledged with a nod and a subject change. Every professional achievement dismissed as, that numbers stuff we don't really understand. I thought about the 38 years I'd spent trying to earn their respect through achievement, through sacrifice, through being whatever they needed me to be, and I realized it would never be enough. I could cure cancer and they'd find a way to make it about David, because they'd decided long ago who mattered and who didn't, who deserved investment and who should just be grateful for scraps. The room was moving on, the toast continuing, people raising glasses to David's success. My mother was already circulating with appetizers, playing hostess. My father was describing David's career trajectory to a group of impressed listeners, and I was standing there, invisible again, holding proof of my family's exploitation, wondering if I had the courage to do what I'd been considering for months. If I spoke now, everything would change. The family, as I knew it, would be destroyed. My relationship with my parents, with David, with every relative in this room, all of it would fracture, possibly forever. But if I stayed silent, nothing would change. I'd continue being the family ATM, the useful one, the one who funded their lifestyle while being called useless to her face. I looked at the folder in my hands. 15 years of sacrifice, quantified and documented. I made my decision. To understand how I ended up in that living room, holding evidence of my own exploitation, you need to understand where it all started. You need to see the little girl I was before I learned to make myself small. I was 10 years old the first time I realized I was different from David in a way that mattered more than the 3 years between us. We grew up in this same house, in a comfortable suburb with good schools and manicured lawns. My father was a mid-level manager at a manufacturing company, not wealthy, but comfortable enough. My mother had been a homemaker since I was born, dedicating herself to maintaining our image in the community. Appearance mattered to her more than anything. What people thought, what they saw, what they could brag about. I was the firstborn. For 3 years, I was the only child, the center of attention. I don't remember much from that time, but the photos show parents who seemed happy, a baby they seemed to love. Then David arrived, and everything shifted in ways I was too young to understand, but old enough to feel. David was everything they wanted: charismatic, athletic, socially confident. He had the kind of charm that made adults smile, that made other children want to be around him. He was popular without trying, the center of attention in every room. I was different. Quiet, studious, more comfortable with books than people. I loved math, the certainty of it, the way numbers always made sense even when people didn't. I'd spend hours working through problems, finding peace in the logical progression from question to answer. My parents didn't know what to do with me. The math competition happened in 5th grade. It was a state-level event, hundreds of students competing. I'd prepared for weeks, working through practice problems, studying strategies. When they announced I'd placed first in my age group, I felt a joy so pure it hurt. I ran home with the trophy and certificate, bursting through the front door, calling for my parents. They were in the backyard. David was practicing soccer. He was 7, playing in a recreational league, and my mother sat in a lawn chair watching him, my father standing nearby with a camera. "Mom, Dad, I won! First place in the whole state." My mother glanced up from watching David. "That's nice, dear. Very studious of you." Then, immediately back to David. "Good kick, honey. Try to aim for the corner." It wasn't even a good kick. The ball had rolled weakly toward the goal. But my father took 3 photos of it. I stood there holding my trophy, feeling it grow heavy in my hands. I'd beaten hundreds of students. I'd won a state competition. And they'd looked at me for maybe 5 seconds before returning their attention to David's recreational soccer practice. That night at dinner, I tried again. I put the trophy on the table, the certificate beside my plate. My father was talking about David's future. "We're thinking long-term for you, buddy. Sports build character, leadership. These are the skills that matter in life." "What about me?" I asked quietly. "What skills matter for me?" My parents looked at me as if I'd asked a confusing question. "You're very capable, Rebecca," my mother said, returning to her meal. "You'll do well at whatever you choose. You're the type who doesn't need much guidance." It wasn't the same. Even at 10, I could hear the difference. David would be something great. I would do well enough. David required investment, attention, planning. Again, I required nothing because I'd figure it out on my own. The pattern continued through my teenage years, so subtle that if you weren't living it, you might not notice. But I noticed. I noticed that my straight A's earned a nod while David's B's earned praise for trying hard. I noticed that my regional writing award was acknowledged with "That's nice," while David's participation trophy from basketball was displayed prominently in our living room. I noticed that when relatives came over, they'd spend 5 minutes asking me about school. Still getting good grades? That's wonderful. Then spend an hour discussing David's social life, his athletic pursuits, his bright future. When I was 15, I won a state scholarship for academic achievement, full tuition to any in-state university. It was a huge honor. I'd given to only 3 students in our state that year. I remember sitting at dinner, heart pounding as I shared the news. "That's excellent, Rebecca," my father said. "Very practical. You've always been good at taking care of yourself." Then, in almost the same breath to David, "Your mother and I have been looking at private colleges for you. We want you to have the best education possible, somewhere that will nurture your leadership potential." David was 12, barely passing middle school, and they were already planning to invest in expensive private education. I was 15 with a full scholarship, and they were relieved they wouldn't have to pay for me. I chose accounting because I was good with numbers and because I genuinely thought, that financial success would earn their respect. That if I became successful in tangible, measurable ways, they'd finally see my value. When I got accepted to a prestigious state university with my scholarship, their response was, "That's practical. You've always been sensible." Meanwhile, they'd already decided to send David to an expensive private college when the time came, because he needs the right environment to reach his full potential. I packed my belongings into my car, a used sedan I'd bought with money from a summer job, and drove to university. I moved into a cramped dorm room. I worked 2 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load. I ate cheap food and wore thrift store clothes and told myself I was building character. And I told myself the lie I'd been telling since I was 10. If I just achieved enough, if I just proved myself valuable enough, they'd finally see me. I was wrong. But it would take me another 20 years to fully understand just how wrong. My 20s were when the pattern became impossible to ignore, when subtle favoritism hardened into something I could no longer explain away as normal family dynamics. After college, I joined a respected accounting firm. I worked 80-hour weeks during tax season. I studied for and passed my CPA exam on the first try. I advanced steadily, earning promotions, building a reputation for reliability and expertise. By 26, I was a senior accountant with a comfortable salary, my own apartment, and a career I was genuinely proud of. David graduated college at 21 with a mediocre GPA and no clear direction. He tried marketing for 6 months, then sales, then something vaguely described as consulting. Nothing lasted more than a year. He moved back home after each failed attempt, living rent-free in his childhood bedroom while figuring things out. My parents supported this completely. "David's exploring his options," my mother would say. "He's not settling for less than he deserves." That's admirable. When I called home to share news of my promotion to senior accountant at 25, my father answered, "That's good, Rebecca. Steady work is important." Then immediately, "Your brother's thinking about law school. We're so proud. He's finally found his calling." My achievement was a transition sentence to David's theoretical plans. "Law school is expensive," I said carefully. "Is he sure he wants to—" "We'll handle the cost," my father interrupted. "This is an investment in his future. He has so much potential." They paid for David's LSAT prep courses, $3,000. They paid for his law school application fees and trips to visit campuses. When he got accepted to a prestigious but expensive private law school, they committed to paying his full tuition, $180,000 over 3 years. Meanwhile, I was living in a small one-bedroom apartment, wearing the same professional wardrobe until my blouses grew thin at the elbows, packing lunches every day to save money. I was building savings slowly, planning for a future where I might own property, might have security, might have the stability everyone else my age seemed to take for granted. When I was 28, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a modest condo. And I mentioned it at Sunday dinner, the weekly obligation my mother insisted on maintaining. "I'm thinking about buying a place," I said. "I've been saving, and I found a good deal on a small condo. Would you consider lending me some money for a larger down payment? I'd pay you back with interest." My father looked at me as if I'd asked something strange. "Rebecca, you have a good job. You can save for it yourself. Your brother needs our support to reach his potential. You're already established." Established. At 28, living in a small rental, driving an aging car, established. While David, unemployed and living at home, needed support. "I've been working hard," I said quietly. "I thought maybe—" "We're very proud of your work ethic," my mother cut in. "You've always been self-sufficient. That's a wonderful quality. But David needs more guidance right now. You understand, don't you?" I understood. I understood that my self-sufficiency was being used as justification to give me nothing, that every time I succeeded despite their neglect, I proved I didn't need their support, so I wouldn't receive it. Family gatherings became exercises in endurance. Every few months, we'd meet at my parents' house for dinner or celebrations. The conversation followed a predictable pattern. Relatives would arrive. Someone would ask me, "Rebecca, how's work?" "It's going really well. I've been—" "That's wonderful." "And David, tell us about law school. We've been hearing such exciting things." And the conversation would shift, attention flowing to David like water finding the natural path. They'd ask about his classes, his professors, his social life. Or they'd discuss his future with genuine fascination. My career was a checkbox to be acknowledged. His potential was an endless source of interest. When David's law school hosted a parents' weekend, my parents drove 6 hours to attend. They posted dozens of photos on social media, gushing about the beautiful campus, the impressive facilities, their pride in their son. When I received a significant client commendation and was featured in our firm's newsletter, I mentioned it at dinner. My mother said, "How nice, dear," then immediately turned to David. "Tell everyone about the moot court competition you participated in. Your father and I were so impressed." The financial inequality became more blatant. When David graduated law school, my parents gave him a luxury car. "You need reliable transportation for interviews," they explained. The car cost more than I earned in a year. When I mentioned that my 7-year-old car was becoming unreliable, my mother suggested I look at certified pre-owned options. They're very economical. David started as an associate at a law firm. He made a decent salary but complained about student debt, about how expensive life was. My parents helped him with a down payment on a condo, a 2-bedroom place in a trendy neighborhood. An investment in his stability, they called it. I was still renting my 1-bedroom apartment, still driving my dying car, still saving every dollar I could while watching my brother receive gift after gift, investment after investment. But here's what complicated everything. I didn't hate David. I loved my brother. He was kind, in a thoughtless, privileged way. He'd call me sometimes just to chat. "Send me funny articles. Remember my birthday." He wasn't malicious. He simply didn't see the inequality because it had always been normal to him. He'd mention casually that our parents were helping him with furniture for his new place, then, in the same conversation, ask if I could loan him $500 until his next paycheck. He'd forget to pay me back, then ask again 6 months later, genuinely confused when I hesitated. Have you ever loved someone who hurts you without meaning to? It's a special kind of pain. Because you can't even be properly angry. You just absorb it, over and over, telling yourself they don't understand, they don't see, they don't realize. When I was 30, my parents hosted an elaborate celebration for David's 30th birthday. They rented an event space, hired caterers, invited 60 people. There was a slideshow of David's life, speeches about his potential, toasts to his future. My 30th birthday, 2 years earlier, had been dinner at a chain restaurant with just our immediate family. My mother brought a grocery store cake. I sat at David's party, watching my parents toast him, call him their pride and joy, their greatest achievement. I looked around at the hundreds of dollars spent on decorations and entertainment, and I felt something crack inside me. Not break. Not yet. But crack. A thin fracture line running through the foundation I'd built my life on. The foundation that said if I just achieved enough, worked hard enough, proved myself enough, they'd eventually see my value. That night, driving home to my small apartment in my aging car, I finally admitted a truth I'd been avoiding. They would never see me the way they saw David. It wasn't about what I achieved. It wasn't about how I proved myself. They'd decided long ago who mattered more. And all my achievements, all my sacrifice, all my quiet competence, none of it would change their minds. I was 30 years old, and I was still waiting for my parents to value me the way they valued my brother. I would wait 8 more years before I stopped. The financial exploitation began so gradually that I didn't recognize it as exploitation. It felt like family, like duty, like what good daughters do when their family needs help. I was 30 years old when my mother first called asking for money. It was a Tuesday evening. I was home reviewing client files when my phone rang. "Rebecca, sweetheart, I need a small favor." Her voice had that tone, the one that meant she wanted something. "We're a bit short this month on the mortgage. Your father's company is going through some changes, and could you loan us $1,200? Just until things stabilize." $1,200 was my monthly food and transportation budget. But I said yes, because she was my mother, and she said they needed help, and I'd been trained for 30 years to say yes. "I'll pay you back next month," she promised. "This is just temporary." I transferred the money that evening. She never mentioned it again. 3 months later, David called. He'd passed the bar exam and was clerking at a firm, but he sounded stressed. "The bar study loans are killing me, and I need to keep up appearances at work. Could you help me out? Just $5,000 until I get my signing bonus. I'll pay you back with interest." $5,000 was a significant chunk of my savings. But he was my brother, starting his career, and our parents had already stretched their budget supporting him through school. I transferred the money. He never paid it back. When I mentioned it 6 months later, he looked confused. I thought that was a gift. You know, family helping family. Then my father's company downsized. He took early retirement, a decision they made without telling me, and suddenly they needed $15,000 to maintain their lifestyle while they adjusted. They framed it as a loan, temporary, just to bridge the gap. I gave them the money. It disappeared like water into sand. The pattern established itself over the next 8 years. Every time I managed to build my savings to a meaningful amount, a family emergency would appear. My mother needed $8,000 for medical procedures. I found out later they were cosmetic treatments, not covered by insurance, but presented to me as necessary surgery. The family home needed a new roof. $12,000. "We'll pay you back when we refinance." David got engaged. His wedding to Michelle, his law school girlfriend, cost $60,000. I was expected to contribute $10,000 toward the reception as a sister's gift, while being told my contribution should be quiet so David wouldn't feel awkward about it. Every request came wrapped in manipulation. My mother would say, "David would help if he could, but he's just starting out. You're established, Rebecca. You don't have a family to support. Surely you can spare this." My father would use guilt. "After everything we've invested in this family, we're just asking for temporary help. This is what family does. This is what being responsible means." But there was never repayment. Never gratitude beyond the moment. Never acknowledgement that I was subsidizing their lifestyle and David's success. I remember sitting in a financial advisor's office when I was 35. It was a routine review required by one of my larger clients. The advisor, a kind woman named Patricia, reviewed my income and expenses. Then she printed out a projection. Based on your salary history and modest lifestyle, you should have approximately $160,000 in savings and retirement accounts. She slid the paper across her desk. You have 28,000. Can you explain this discrepancy? I looked at the spreadsheet, at the years of income, at where it should have gone versus where it actually went. The difference was $132,000. I knew exactly where it had gone. Every emergency call, every family crisis, every temporary loan that became permanent. Family obligations, I said quietly. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Rebecca, have they paid any of this back? I shook my head. Do you have written agreements? Repayment schedules? No, it's family. They'll pay me back when they can. She leaned forward. I need to ask you something, and I'm asking as someone who's seen this pattern before. Are you being financially exploited by your family? The word exploited hit me like cold water. They're not. It's not like that. They just need help sometimes. I'm the stable one. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed in my small apartment, thinking about $132,000, more than an entire year of my salary. Money I could have used for a home, for retirement, for security. Money that had funded my parents' lifestyle and David's success while I stayed stuck in place. Meanwhile, David's career was flourishing. He made partner at his firm at 33. Unusually young, a real achievement. His income surpassed mine. He bought an expensive house in a prestigious neighborhood. My parents were thrilled, hosting dinners in his honor, displaying photos of his success. When I landed a major client, a regional chain that wanted comprehensive tax planning, it was the biggest account I'd ever secured. I told my parents at Sunday dinner, actually excited to share the news. My mother said, "That's good, dear. You've always been competent with numbers." Then immediately to David, "Tell us about the case you won. I heard it was in the newspaper." My biggest professional achievement received 10 seconds before conversation pivoted to David's latest success. I watched clients' families during meetings, saw parents who celebrated all their children equally, who invested in their kids based on need rather than favoritism, who understood that love wasn't a finite resource that had to be rationed. I poured my need for validation into work. I became exceptional in my field. I earned industry recognition, built a reputation for integrity and expertise, took on complex cases that other accountants avoided. My work became both my refuge and my revenge. Then I'd prove my worth professionally since my family wouldn't acknowledge it personally. When I was 37, I was named one of the top CPAs in our state. It was a prestigious industry award given to only 20 professionals annually. The announcement was published in trade journals and local business publications. It was, objectively, a significant achievement. I told my family at Sunday dinner. I'd brought a copy of the publication, thinking maybe, finally, they'd understand what I'd accomplished. My mother glanced at it. "How nice, dear. You must be very pleased." Then, putting the publication down without reading it, "David, tell everyone about your promotion to senior partner. That's such an accomplishment. We're so proud." I sat there as the conversation shifted to David's career again, as my parents gushed about his success, as relatives congratulated him on his continued rise. My award sat on the table, unread, already forgotten. That night, I sat in my apartment looking at my life. The same small space I'd lived in for 8 years, the same aging car, the same modest furniture I'd bought secondhand. My peers owned homes, had families, took vacations, built wealth. I'd given my family $132,000, a number that still shocked me every time I thought about it. I'd sacrificed my own financial security to fund their lifestyle and my brother's success, and I was still invisible, still competent with numbers, but not worthy of real recognition. Still useful for money, but useless for anything that actually mattered to them. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. I titled it Family Financial History, and I started documenting everything, every request, every transfer, every broken promise of repayment. I didn't know yet what I'd do with it, but for the first time in my life, I was keeping score. It felt like the beginning of something, like a crack widening into a chasm, like the moment before everything changes. I just didn't know how soon that moment would come. 1 year later, at 38, I finally did something just for me. For 18 months, I'd been secretly saving. Every tax refund, every client bonus, every dollar I could spare went into a separate savings account at a different bank, one my family didn't know about and couldn't access. I learned to say no to some requests. Not all. I wasn't that strong yet. But some. Mom, I can't this month. I have my own expenses. Dad, I'm rebuilding my savings. You'll need to find another solution. They didn't like it, but they accepted it, probably because they assumed I'd always cave eventually. By the time I turned 38, I had $55,000 saved, the most I'd ever had at one time. I'd been pre-approved for a mortgage. I'd found a modest 2-bedroom townhouse in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it had good light and a small yard, and it was mine. Or it would be. The closing was scheduled for 3 weeks away. I'd already imagined where I'd put my furniture, how I'd finally have a proper home office, what it would feel like to own something that was truly mine. Then my father called. Rebecca, we need to have a family meeting. Tonight, if possible. It's important. Something in his voice made my stomach drop. What's wrong? We'll discuss it when everyone's together. Can you be here by 7? I arrived at my parents' house that evening with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. The whole family was gathered. My parents, David and Michelle, their 2 young children playing with toys in the corner. The atmosphere was serious. No one was smiling. David looked uncomfortable. Michelle looked sympathetic. My parents looked stressed in a way I'd never seen before. We sat in the living room. My father started speaking before I'd even fully settled into my chair. We're facing a temporary financial crisis. His voice was grave. Due to some bad investments and my early retirement. He paused. I didn't know he'd taken early retirement. Combined with maintaining our lifestyle, we've accumulated significant debt. Each we need $60,000 immediately to consolidate and avoid potential bankruptcy. $60,000, more than my entire savings. My mother added quickly, We're not asking for charity. We'll pay you back within 2 years. We just need help right now. You're the only one who can help us. I looked at David. He was studying his hands. Why can't you downsize? I asked. Sell the house, move somewhere smaller, reduce expenses? My mother's face hardened. We've lived in this house for 35 years. We're not losing our home because of temporary problems. You don't understand what it means to have roots, Rebecca. You've always been content with less. David? I looked at my brother. Can you help? He shifted uncomfortably. My money's tied up in investments and the kids' college funds. I can't liquidate without major penalties. I'm sorry, Rebecca. If I could help, I would. Our parents nodded approvingly. David was being financially responsible, protecting his children's future. Unlike me, apparently, with my lack of family obligations. I've been saving to buy a home, I said quietly. I'm supposed to close in 3 weeks. My father leaned forward. You can buy a home later. This is a crisis. Family comes first. Then, adding weight to the guilt. Besides, You don't have children to consider. Your timeline is flexible. My mother added, honestly, Rebecca, at your age and without marriage prospects, renting is probably more practical anyway. Don't be selfish when your family is in trouble. Selfish. The word landed like a slap. I'd given them $132,000 over 8 years. What I'd sacrificed my own security repeatedly. And I was selfish for hesitating to give my last savings. How much do you actually need? I asked. 60,000 would cover everything, my father said. But we'd understand if you can only spare 50. We'd make that work. They knew. Somehow they knew approximately how much I had. Maybe they'd been tracking my refusals, calculating when I'd have rebuilt my savings. Maybe it was a lucky guess. Either way, they were asking for everything I had. I left that night without committing. I need time to think, I said. Give me 24 hours. My mother looked offended. What's there to think about? Your family needs you. But I left anyway. At home, I spread out 15 years of bank statements. I looked at every transfer, every temporary loan, every emergency that had drained my accounts. And the total was $185,000 when I included everything. The documented transfers, plus the small amounts I'd stopped tracking. Nearly $200,000. Years of my life, my financial security, my dreams. All gone to fund their lifestyle and David's success. I called Janet, my closest friend and colleague. We'd worked together for 15 years, and she'd watched this dynamic with growing concern. Rebecca, this is financial abuse, she said when I told her. They've taken nearly $200,000 from you. Now they want your home down payment? This has to stop. But what if they really are in crisis? Then they sell the house, they downsize, they face consequences of their choices. That's what adults do. They don't drain their daughter's savings for the 5th time. We talked for 2 hours, but in the end I couldn't say no. The programming ran too deep. The next morning, I told my parents I'd give them the money, but I had one condition. I want a promissory note. Legal, binding, with a repayment schedule. I need this in writing. My father looked insulted. You want a contract? From your own parents? That's hurtful, Rebecca. We're not strangers. Then signing a simple document shouldn't be a problem. My mother's eyes narrowed. This shows exactly who you are. Always suspicious. Always thinking the worst of people. No wonder you're alone. But I insisted. I'd learned that much at least. Finally, resentfully, they agreed. We met at my parents' house 2 days later. I'd had an attorney draft a simple promissory note, $52,000. I kept $3,000 for emergencies, to be repaid over 24 months at 5% interest. My father signed. My mother signed. David witnessed it, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing in my defense. I transferred the money that afternoon, $52,000, moving from my account to theirs with a few keystrokes. My townhouse closing fell through. The seller found another buyer who could close immediately. My dream of homeownership evaporated. I told myself it was temporary. I had the promissory note. They'd pay me back. This was the last time. 2 weeks later, I stopped by their house to drop off some tax documents they'd need for filing. I rang the bell, but no one answered. I could hear voices inside. So I let myself in. I still had a key. Hello? Mom? Dad? My mother's voice came from the kitchen. She was on the phone, and she sounded happy. The crisis is over, thank goodness. Rebecca's money solved everything. We're actually thinking of taking that Mediterranean cruise we've been wanting. We deserve it after all this stress. I froze in the hallway. My father's voice joined in. And we should look at upgrading the kitchen. If we're staying in this house long term, we might as well make it exactly what we want. That new contractor gave us a good estimate. I stood there, my heart pounding, listening to them plan luxury purchases with my $52,000. The money they'd needed to avoid bankruptcy. The money that had cost me my home. I walked into the kitchen. They both startled when they saw me. Rebecca, we didn't hear you come in. I heard you, I said quietly. Planning your cruise, your kitchen renovation, with my money. My father's face shifted from surprise to defensiveness. We didn't lie. We had debts. We used your money responsibly to consolidate them. What we do with our other money is our business. You told me you were facing bankruptcy. We were stressed about our finances. That's a form of crisis. My mother added, Really, Rebecca, why are you making this about money? Family helps family without keeping score. Without keeping score. After 15 years of taking from me, after using my last savings for luxuries, they were telling me not to keep score. I left without another word, got in my car, drove to my apartment, and something inside me finally broke completely. Not cracked. Broke. I sat on my floor, surrounded by 15 years of bank statements, and felt the programming that had controlled my life for 38 years finally shatter. They'd lied, or manipulated, or exaggerated. However you wanted to frame it, they'd taken my money under false pretenses and were using it for vacations and home upgrades. And I was done. I was done being the family ATM. Done being useful for money and useless for anything else. Done making myself small so they could feel big. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Evidence of financial exploitation. I would document everything, and I would wait for my moment. Because they'd have another party soon. Another celebration for David. Another gathering where they'd perform their role as successful parents. And when they did, when they inevitably dismissed me in front of everyone as they always did, I wouldn't stay silent. This time, I'd respond. And they would never see it coming. Over the next 3 months, I watched my family's life unfold on social media like a performance I'd unknowingly funded. My mother posted photos of their Mediterranean cruise, crystal blue waters, expensive restaurants, sunset views from their balcony. Finally taking time for ourselves, the caption read. We've worked so hard, we deserve this. My father shared updates about their kitchen renovation, marble countertops, custom cabinets, professional-grade appliances. Upgrading our forever home, he wrote, investing in our comfort for the retirement years. David posted about his promotion to senior partner, complete with photos from a celebratory dinner at the city's most expensive steakhouse. I scrolled through it all from my small apartment, my bank account sitting at $3,000, all that remained of 18 months of saving, the cost of my continued invisibility, quantified. No one mentioned repayment. The promissory note they'd signed might as well have never existed. I brought it up once, carefully, at a Sunday dinner. Mom, Dad, we should probably discuss the repayment schedule. The note says first payment is due this month. My father didn't even look up from his meal. We'll start repaying when we're more stable financially. Don't be pushy about it, Rebecca. We just got through a crisis. But the cruise, that was a gift to ourselves. We needed it for our mental health. Well, you wouldn't understand the stress we were under. He finally looked at me, his expression almost annoyed. We'll pay you back. Stop acting like we're criminals. My mother added, her voice sharp. Are you threatening your own parents, Rebecca? This is why you're alone. You can't maintain relationships because you're always so rigid and unforgiving. David said nothing. He just focused on his food, pretending not to hear. During those 3 months, I did something I should have done years ago. I helped my parents with their taxes. They still expected my professional services for free, of course, and I saw their actual financial situation. They weren't in crisis. They'd never been in crisis. My father's retirement income, combined with their investments and Social Security, was more than comfortable. In the debt they'd needed to consolidate was credit card debt from discretionary spending, vacations, home improvements, entertaining, not survival expenses, luxuries. But the discovery that truly broke me came from a document I found while organizing their tax files, a bank statement from 2 months before their supposed crisis. It showed a $40,000 transfer to David. I called the bank listed on the statement, confirming it was legitimate. Then I asked my father about it at the next family dinner, keeping my voice casual. "Dad, I saw a large transfer to David a few months ago. What was that for?" David looked up sharply. My father's expression flickered. Surprise, then defensiveness. "We helped David invest in a vacation property. A good opportunity came up, and when we wanted to support him." 2 months before you told me you were facing bankruptcy? Silence. You gave David $40,000, then told me you needed $60,000 from me to avoid financial disaster? My mother jumped in. Those were separate situations. We helped David with an investment, then our own situation changed. You're twisting things, Rebecca. I'm stating facts. You're being vindictive. We knew this would happen. We knew you'd throw this back in our faces. She stood up from the table. This is exactly why we can't trust you with anything important. I left that dinner and drove straight to Janet's house. She was my only real friend in all of this, the only person who'd consistently told me the truth about my family's behavior. We spread everything across her dining room table. 15 years of bank statements, text messages, emails, the promissory note, documentation of their actual financial status. Together, we organized it chronologically, highlighted key transactions, created a comprehensive timeline of exploitation. The total was $185,000, with calculated interest closer to $220,000. Janet sat back in her chair, looking at the evidence. "You could sue," she said quietly. "The promissory note alone is legally binding. With this documentation, you'd win." "I don't want to sue. Not yet." "Then what do you want?" I thought about that carefully. "I want them to face what they've done. I want witnesses. I want the family and friends who've watched me be dismissed for decades to see the truth." "That's nuclear, Rebecca. There's no coming back from public exposure." "I know." And I did know. I'd thought about nothing else for weeks. But I'm already lost to them. I'm just the ATM, the useful one. If I stay silent and walk away, nothing changes. They'll find another source of money. They'll never face consequences. Janet leaned forward. "What's the trigger? What will make you speak?" "David's being celebrated. Mom called yesterday to tell me they're hosting a party for his senior partnership. 40 people. Catered. The works." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She told me to try not to be late and to dress appropriately, as if I'm an embarrassment they're forced to include." "And you'll go?" "I'll go. I'll bring the documentation. And when they inevitably dismiss me in front of everyone, because they will, they always do, I'll respond. With facts, with numbers, with truth." Janet was quiet for a long moment. "This will destroy your relationship with them." "What relationship? The one where I'm worth $185,000 but not worth respect? That relationship is already destroyed. I'm just going to stop pretending it exists." Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared meticulously. I created a comprehensive folder with tab dividers, bank statements in one section, the promissory note in another, documentation of their actual financial status in a third. I included a one-page summary with key numbers highlighted. I made it irrefutable. I also consulted an attorney, not Janet, to keep our friendship separate from legal issues. The attorney reviewed everything and confirmed I had multiple grounds for legal action if I chose to pursue it. The promissory note is enforceable. The pattern of exploitation is documented. If they've told anyone you gave these amounts as gifts, that's fraud. I'm not ready to sue, but I want to be prepared. Then keep this documentation safe and consider what you want as an outcome: repayment, acknowledgement, relationship, consequences, I said. I want them to face consequences for the first time in their lives. I removed my parents as beneficiaries from my retirement accounts and life insurance. I changed all my passwords and security questions. I transferred my remaining savings to a new bank. I was cutting off access, preparing for total separation. The night before David's party, I stood in my apartment getting ready. I chose a professional outfit, elegant, composed, successful looking. I would walk into that party looking like someone who'd built a career despite her family, not because of them. I held the folder of documentation and felt something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. For 38 years, I'd made myself small so they could feel big. I'd accepted useless as a description while funding their lives with nearly $200,000. I'd stayed silent while they exploited my love and weaponized my guilt. Tomorrow, that silence ended. I texted Janet, "I'm ready. Tomorrow, I tell the truth." She responded immediately, "I'll be a phone call away. When you leave that party, win or lose, you won't be alone. I promise." I lay in bed that night, not anxious but resolved. I'd made peace with the potential consequences. Losing my family, losing relatives, being labeled vindictive, all of it was possible. Probable, even. But I'd already lost my family years ago. I'd just been pretending otherwise, and I was tired of pretending. Tomorrow, I'd speak truth to people who'd spent decades lying to themselves about who they were and what they'd done. Tomorrow, I'd stop being useful and start being free. Whatever it cost, it would be worth it. Janet Chen had been my friend for 15 years, but I'd never fully appreciated what that meant until the week before David's party. We met as junior accountants at the same firm, both of us ambitious, both of us analytical, both of us using work as proof of our worth in different ways. Janet was more direct than me, more willing to challenge authority, quicker to set boundaries. Over the years, as my career flourished but my family dynamics worsened, she became the truth teller I desperately needed. She was successful now, senior partner at a different firm, married to a kind man named Tom, with a teenage son named Marcus, but she'd come from a dysfunctional family herself. She understood what it cost to maintain toxic relationships. "I cut my family off when I was 30, she told me once. They were draining me financially and emotionally. The rupture was terrible. 6 months of them calling me ungrateful, selfish, cruel. But then it stopped. And I built a life without their dysfunction. It was the hardest and best decision I ever made." The Monday before David's party, Janet came to my apartment after work. We sat at my small kitchen table with the folder of evidence between us. "Walk me through worst-case scenarios," she said, pulling out a notepad. "Every fear you have. Well, we're going to examine each one. The entire extended family turns against me." "And what does that actually cost you?" she asked. "These are people who watched you be exploited for 15 years and said nothing. If they turn against you for speaking truth, what relationship are you really losing?" I thought about that. My aunts and uncles who'd watched my achievements be dismissed, cousins who'd witnessed the favoritism, family friends who'd seen the inequality but never questioned it. People who require my silence to maintain their comfort, I said slowly. That's what I'd lose. Exactly. Next fear. My parents tell lies to counter my claims. They make me seem unstable or vindictive. You have documentation, bank statements, signed promissory notes, tax returns. They can call you whatever they want, but numbers don't lie. And you're a CPA. Your professional reputation is built on accuracy. Who's more credible? We went through every fear systematically. David's professional reputation being affected, being written out of the family entirely, People calling me jealous or bitter, social isolation, professional consequences. For each one, Janet asked the same question: and what does that actually cost you? The answer was always the same: less than staying silent would cost. What do you want to happen after you speak? She asked. Reconciliation? Apology? I want them to face what they've done. I want people to know the truth. After that, I trailed off. I can't control their response. I can only control my honesty. Janet nodded. Then let's make sure you're ready to be honest. Practice with me. For the next hour, we role-played scenarios. Janet played my father making dismissive comments, my mother offering excuses, David trying to minimize everything. She was harsh, deliberately, throwing every justification and deflection they might use. Don't get emotional, she coached. Stick to facts, dates, amounts, broken promises. Make it about numbers, not feelings. That's your strength as a CPA. We practiced until I could state the facts calmly, clearly, without my voice shaking or my hands trembling. Until I could say $185,000 like it was just data, not my entire financial life. What if they interrupt you? Janet asked. I keep talking. I'm stating facts. They don't get to control the narrative anymore. What if people look uncomfortable? Good. They should be uncomfortable. The truth is, uncomfortable. Wednesday evening, Janet helped me with practical planning. We reviewed my financial independence. My job wasn't connected to family. My apartment wasn't in their name. My car was paid off. I had savings rebuilt to $5,000. I could survive their absence. She made sure I had support systems in place. You're spending Thanksgiving with us this year, she said firmly. No arguments. You'll have somewhere to go for holidays. We identified professional references that didn't involve my family. She gave me her therapist's contact information. She even talked to Tom and Marcus, making sure they understood I might need their family if mine fell apart. You won't be alone, she said. That's the most important thing. When you leave that party, whatever happens, you'll have people who care about you. Thursday, I visited my office late in the evening. I walked through the quiet building, looking at my achievements displayed on the walls. Client testimonials praising my integrity and expertise. Industry awards I'd earned through years of dedicated work. My CPA certification, earned on my first attempt. Something only 50% of test takers manage. I'd built all of this despite my family, not because of them. Every achievement was mine. They could dismiss it, but they couldn't erase it. Friday night, the eve of the party, Janet came over one last time. We sat in my small living room with tea, the folder on my coffee table. Last chance, she said gently. You can walk away quietly. Cut contact. Rebuild your life without confrontation. No one would blame you. I looked at the folder. 15 years of exploitation, organized and documented. If I walk away quietly, when nothing changes, I said, they'll tell everyone I'm ungrateful, difficult, oversensitive. They'll rewrite history to make themselves victims. They'll never face what they've done. And facing it matters to you? It matters that people know the truth. It matters that other people in my situation see that speaking up is possible. It matters that I stop carrying their secrets. I looked at Janet. I've spent 38 years being useless in their eyes while funding their lives. Tomorrow, I stop being silent about it, whatever it costs. Janet squeezed my hand. Then I'll be there. Not at the party. That needs to be you. But one phone call away. When you walk out of there, regardless of how they react, I'll be waiting. You won't process this alone. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment. I wasn't nervous. I was resolved. I thought about the little girl who'd won a math competition and been ignored, the teenager whose scholarship was dismissed as practical, The woman who'd given nearly $200,000 and been called useless for her trouble. Tomorrow, that woman would speak, and everyone would hear her. I went to bed early, setting my alarm for 8 a.m. I needed to be rested, composed, clear-headed. This wasn't about emotion or drama. It was about truth, stated calmly and irrefutably. As I drifted off to sleep, my last thought was simple. Tomorrow, I choose myself. For the first time in my life, I choose my own dignity over their comfort. And whatever comes after that, I'll face it standing up instead of making myself small. I arrived at my parents' house at 7:30 Saturday evening, deliberately on time. Cars lined the street, expensive vehicles belonging to relatives and David's law firm colleagues. The house looked festive, lights glowing warmly in the windows. I parked my aging sedan at the end of the block and sat for a moment, the folder in my lap. Inside were 15 years of proof that my family's image was built on my silent sacrifice. Tonight, that silence ended. I walked up the driveway, past the manicured lawn I'd helped pay to maintain. Through the windows, I could see people mingling, laughing, celebrating. A banner hung across the living room. "Congratulations, David, partner." I opened the front door and stepped inside. My mother spotted me immediately, her smile tight and practiced. "Rebecca, you made it, and only 20 minutes late." "I'm exactly on time, Mom." She blinked, momentarily thrown by the correction. Nim then recovered. "Well, try to socialize, dear. Don't hide in corners like you usually do." I moved deeper into the room, carrying my folder discreetly. Approximately 40 people filled the space: extended family, my parents' social circle, David's colleagues, neighbors. Everyone dressed nicely, drinking wine, eating catered appetizers. My father stood in the center of a group, gesturing animatedly as he told a story. "David's partnership is remarkable. Senior partner at 35. We always knew he had something special." David accepted congratulations graciously, his wife Michelle beside him, their children chasing each other around the room. He looked successful, happy, surrounded by celebration. Several people acknowledged me with polite nods. An aunt asked, "Rebecca, still with the accounting firm?" "Yes. I made partner last year. Actually." "Oh, how nice. Excuse me, I need to refill my drink." She moved away before I could say more. My partnership, earned through 15 years of dedicated work, was dismissed in 5 seconds. I stood near the edge of the room, watching my family perform. My parents playing proud parents who'd sacrificed everything for their children's success. David graciously accepting praise, relatives and friends admiring the perfect family image. An hour into the party, my father called for attention. Everyone gathered in the living room, wine glasses in hand. David stood beside my father, looking slightly embarrassed by the attention but pleased. My father raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate David's incredible achievement. Senior partner at 35. That's exceptional by any measure." The crowd murmured agreement. I stood at the back, the folder heavy in my hands. "Michelle and I are so proud," my father continued, his voice growing emotional. "We invested everything in our children. We sacrificed. We supported. We believed. And seeing David reach this level of success makes every sacrifice worthwhile. Every sacrifice." I thought about the $185,000 I'd given them. The sacrifices I'd actually made while they invested in David. My father looked around the room, basking in the admiration. Then his eyes landed on me, and something shifted in his expression. Maybe he remembered I'd arrived late earlier that week. Maybe he just couldn't resist the familiar pattern of dismissing me. "You know," he said, his tone turning pointed. "David, this is why you're successful. You understand priorities." The room chuckled. Several people glanced at me. Encouraged by the laughter, my father continued. Let's be honest, Rebecca has always been useless when it comes to real achievement. She's not like David. Some people are just built differently. The word useless echoed through the room. The crowd's laughter became uncertain. Several relatives looked uncomfortable. My mother, perhaps sensing my father had gone too far, tried to soften it. Rebecca's always been content with her little numbers job. Not everyone needs to achieve great things. The world needs accountants, too. More awkward chuckling. David looked embarrassed but said nothing. Michelle glanced at me with what might have been sympathy. This was the moment. The public dismissal I'd been waiting for. And the casual cruelty that had defined our relationship for 38 years. I took a breath and spoke, my voice calm and clear. Actually, I'd like to address that, since we're talking about usefulness and achievement in front of everyone. The room went silent. Heads turned toward me. My father's expression shifted from jovial to annoyed. My mother's smile froze. David's face showed alarm. He sensed something coming. I stepped forward, still holding my folder. For the past 15 years, I've given this family $185,000. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone's wine glass clinked loudly as they set it down. People pulled out phones or exchanged shocked glances. I continued, my voice steady. Mortgage payments when you claimed you were short. David's law school living expenses. Medical bills. Home repairs. Debt consolidation. Emergency loans that were never emergencies. 3 months ago, I gave you my entire savings, $52,000, because you claimed you were facing bankruptcy. My father's face was reddening. David looked between me and our parents, confused. I had to abandon buying my first home. I'm 38 years old and I live in a one-bedroom apartment because every time I save money, there's a family crisis. I looked directly at my parents. 2 weeks after I gave you that money, I overheard you planning a Mediterranean cruise and kitchen renovation. There was no crisis. You used my life savings for luxuries. My mother tried to interrupt. Rebecca, this is inappropriate. I have documentation, I said, my voice still calm but powerful. I held up the folder but didn't open it. Bank statements. Impromissory notes you signed 3 months ago and have ignored. Tax returns showing you were never in financial crisis. Texts and emails requesting money with promises of repayment that never happened. 15 years of proof that my usefulness was measured entirely by my bank account. The room was utterly silent. I could hear the children playing in another room, oblivious to what was happening. Someone's phone was recording. I could see the small red light. I continued. I'm a CPA. I'm good with numbers. So here are some facts. I've earned recognition as one of the top CPAs in this state, an achievement you never acknowledged. I made partner at my firm last year, something you dismissed in 10 seconds. And I've built a respected career while you called it boring number work. And I've funded your lifestyle and David's success while being called useless in my own family. My father found his voice. You have no right to air private matters. You called me useless in front of 40 people. You made it public. I looked around the room at all the witnesses. I'm done being silent about it. I'm done accepting useless as a description of a daughter who sacrificed $185,000 and 15 years of financial security so you could maintain appearances and celebrate David without acknowledging the actual cost. David spoke for the first time, his voice shaky. Rebecca, I didn't know. You stood there while they called me useless and said nothing. That's all I need to know about what you did or didn't know. I set the folder on a nearby table among the celebration decorations, physical evidence in the middle of their party. To everyone here, I said, addressing the crowd directly, sometimes the cost of family peace is sacrificing yourself completely. I'm done paying that cost. I'm done protecting people who exploited my love and weaponized my guilt. I looked at my parents one last time. You'll be hearing from my attorney about the promissory note repayment. Every dollar, with interest, as legally agreed. This conversation is over. I walked toward the door. Behind me, the room erupted. Raised voices, shocked exclamations, my father trying to explain, my mother demanding that people not believe my lies, David calling my name, but I didn't stop. Outside, and the evening air was cold and clean. I sat in my car, my hands shaking now that it was over. I'd done it. I'd told the truth in front of everyone. My phone was already buzzing. Calls, texts, messages. I ignored them all except one. I texted Janet. I did it. I told them everything. Her response came immediately. I'm so proud of you. Come to my house. Don't be alone tonight. I started my car and drove away from my parents' house, leaving the chaos visible through the windows. People arguing, my father gesturing angrily, my mother in tears, David looking shell-shocked. I'd destroyed the family image. I'd exposed their exploitation. I'd burned every bridge back to the life I'd known for 38 years. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Even if I'd lost everything else, even if every person in that room turned against me, and I'd gained something more valuable, my voice, my truth, my dignity. I'd stopped being useful to their narrative and become invaluable to myself. And that trade was worth everything it would cost. The first call came at 9 p.m. while I was at Janet's house drinking tea and processing what I'd done. My father's voice on my voicemail was ice cold with rage. You've destroyed this family. Your mother is devastated. David is humiliated at his firm. People are already asking him about it. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? You're no longer welcome in our home or our lives. Don't contact us again. The second call, 10 minutes later, was my mother. How could you do this to us? In front of everyone? You've always been jealous of David, and now everyone knows it. You've destroyed our reputation in the community. This is unforgivable. Then came the texts. Long, rambling messages about my ungratefulness, my vindictive nature, my inability to maintain relationships. They were telling relatives I'd exaggerated, that I was mentally unstable, that the money had been gifts, freely given, that I was now weaponizing. David sent a single text at 11 p.m. Rebecca, I didn't know it was that bad. I'm sorry you felt used. But did you have to destroy everything publicly? Couldn't we have talked privately? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed. I tried silence for 15 years. How did that work? You stood there while they called me useless and said nothing. That's your answer. He didn't respond. But then other messages started coming. An aunt I barely knew. I always saw how differently they treated you. I should have said something. One, I'm sorry. A cousin. My parents did the same thing to me, favored my brother, took my money. Your courage helped me recognize my situation. Thank you. 3 different relatives confided they'd experienced financial exploitation in their own families. My public truth-telling had given them permission to acknowledge their own. The weekend passed in a blur. Janet and Tom made sure I wasn't alone. Marcus, their teenage son, offered me his room, but I slept on their couch, grateful just to be surrounded by people who cared without conditions. Monday morning, my attorney called. I saw what happened. Are you okay? I'm okay. Can we move forward with the promissory note? Absolutely. I'll send the demand letter today. The letter went out Monday afternoon, certified mail. $52,000 immediately per the signed agreement, to plus $45,000 in documented loans where repayment was explicitly promised in writing. Total, $97,000, due within 60 days, or legal proceedings would commence. My parents called my attorney's office within hours, Furious, my attorney let their call go to voicemail, then called me. They're threatening counterclaims of financial elder abuse. They say they can't pay. They're in their early 60s and financially comfortable. The financial abuse claim is absurd. I know. I'm responding with documentation of their actual financial status, their cruise expenses, home renovations, the fact that they gave David $40,000 2 months before taking your $52,000. The poverty claim won't hold. My parents tried calling me directly. I blocked their numbers. They tried emailing. I set up a filter sending their messages to a folder I didn't read. All communication went through my attorney. 2 weeks later, cornered by irrefutable documentation and the reality of legally binding contracts, they agreed to a repayment plan. $1,500 monthly for 65 months. 5 years of payments. Legally binding with penalties for missed payments. They'd pay. Slowly. Resentfully. But they'd pay. The social consequences rippled through the community. Some of my parents' social circle distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the exposed dysfunction. Others took their side. Family matters should stay private. Rebecca was vindictive. Children owe their parents respect. But more people than I expected reached out with support. David's law firm colleagues who'd witnessed my speech. Some respected my courage. Others avoided the drama, but the story spread. My parents could no longer present themselves as successful parents without people knowing the full cost. At work, I was nervous about fallout, but my managing partner called me into his office Wednesday after the party. "I heard about what happened," he said carefully. My stomach dropped. "I understand if this affects my position. Rebecca, you're one of our best CPAs. Your professional reputation is impeccable. Your personal family dynamics don't change that." He paused. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something else. We've been approached by several professional organizations asking if you'd speak about financial dynamics in families. Apparently, your situation resonated with a lot of people." I blinked. "They want me to speak about it?" "The family ATM dynamic, each they're calling it, where successful children are systematically exploited through guilt and obligation. It's common, but people don't talk about it." He leaned forward. "You don't have to. But if you want to turn your experience into education that helps others, we'd support it." Over the next month, I spoke at 3 local CPA organization meetings. Each time, the rooms were packed. Each time, people came up afterward with tears in their eyes, sharing their own stories of family financial exploitation. My family drains my accounts, but I felt too guilty to stop. "I'm the family ATM too. Your story gave me permission to set boundaries." I thought I was the only one. Thank you for making this visible. 4 months after the confrontation, I found a new townhouse. Smaller than I'd originally planned, but perfect. 2 bedrooms. A small yard. Good light. I used my rebuilt savings plus the first 4 installments of my parents' repayment, $6,000 toward my down payment. Janet, Tom, Marcus, and several colleagues from work helped me move in. We spent the day carrying boxes, assembling furniture, laughing. Real friends, chosen family. A young accountant from my firm, Amy, came to my office one afternoon. "Can I talk to you about something personal?" "Of course." "My family keeps asking me to pay for my brother's wedding. I'm barely making rent, but they say I'm selfish if I don't help. I saw your speech. Someone recorded it and it's been shared. It gave me permission to say no. I just wanted to thank you." I realized then that my public confrontation had ripple effects beyond my own situation. Every person who set boundaries because of my story was someone who wouldn't lose 15 years to exploitation like I had. 6 months after the party, I unpacked the last box in my townhouse. I hung my CPA certification on the wall, not hidden, displayed with pride. Beside it, a photo of Janet and me at a conference where I'd spoken about family financial boundaries. I stood in my small home office, looking at evidence of a life rebuilt. Not perfect. I still struggled with guilt sometimes, still wondered if I'd been too harsh. But mostly, I felt something I'd never felt before. Free. My phone buzzed. Another monthly payment notification. $1,500 deposited from my parents' account. No message, no contact. Just the money. Slowly returning. I didn't need it anymore. My life was stable without it. But I kept accepting the payments. Not for the money, but for the acknowledgement. Every month they faced what they'd done. Every month they paid the cost of their exploitation. And every month I built my life a little more solidly, a little more independently, a little more freely. If this resonates with you, if you've ever been the family ATM, the one who gives and gives while being told you're selfish for wanting anything back, know this: your silence protects people who exploit you. Your truth protects you and everyone who comes after. Speaking up destroyed my family relationships, but those relationships were already built on my exploitation. All I did was stop pretending they were real. And what I gained: self-respect, financial freedom, the power to build a life on my terms, was worth every relationship it cost. 1 year after the party, I sat in my townhouse on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, looking at a life that finally felt like mine. I was 39 years old, and for the first time, I wasn't waiting for my parents' approval to feel worthy. The relationship with my parents remained fractured. $1,500 appeared in my account monthly like clockwork, but there was no other communication. No apologies, no acknowledgement, no relationship. Just money and silence. David sent occasional emails. Maybe someday we can talk. I'm sorry for my part in this. I miss my sister. But he never acknowledged what his part actually was, never offered real accountability. Just vague sadness and the hope I'd eventually forgive without him having to truly understand. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. And I'd learned that was okay. Healing didn't require them to change. It required me to change my relationship with the pain. My professional life had flourished in unexpected ways. I'd been promoted to senior partner at my firm, achieving the same level David had, but through my own merit and 15 years of dedicated work. I'd developed a specialty in helping clients navigate family financial dynamics, using my painful expertise to protect others. I taught workshops now. Financial boundaries with family. Recognizing emotional manipulation. The family ATM, when love becomes exploitation. The sessions filled quickly, mostly with women, elder daughters, caretakers who'd been conditioned to sacrifice endlessly. My personal life had transformed too. I was dating someone, Michael, a fellow CPA I'd met at a conference. He'd heard me speak about family financial boundaries and approached me afterward. "Your courage is remarkable," he'd said. "Not many people are willing to tell that truth publicly." He contributed equally to our relationship. He celebrated my achievements without trying to claim credit. He'd never asked me for money, not even to split a check unevenly. Our relationship was balanced, mutual, respectful. I had close friends now: Janet's family, colleagues who'd become genuine friends, people from my workshops who'd reached out to build community. I spent holidays with people who celebrated me, who reciprocated care and attention. One Saturday afternoon, I encountered my mother at a community fundraiser. It was unavoidable. We lived in the same mid-sized city, moved in overlapping professional and social circles. She looked older, diminished somehow, despite her expensive clothes and carefully styled hair. We made eye contact across the room, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she approached. Slowly, carefully. "Rebecca." "Mom." Silence. Around us, the fundraiser continued. People mingling, laughing, unaware of the chasm between us. "You look well," she finally said. Not kind, not warm, just observation. "I am well." More silence. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it. What could she say? Apologizing would require admitting wrongdoing. Justifying would make her sound worse. She settled on. "We always loved you. We just... David needed more support. We thought you were strong enough not to need us." I looked at this woman who'd raised me, who'd valued me less than my brother for 38 years, who'd taken nearly $200,000 and called me useless. "Strength isn't an excuse to exploit someone," I said gently but firmly. "Needing less attention doesn't mean deserving no recognition. You had 2 children. You chose to invest in one and withdraw from the other. That was your choice, and these are the consequences." She had no response. We stood there for another awkward moment. Then she excused herself. I watched her walk away, feeling a complicated mix of sadness and peace. Sadness for what we'd never been. Peace that I was no longer waiting for her to become someone she couldn't be. The most meaningful moment came from unexpected places. A young female accountant, Sarah, asked to meet with me for coffee. She reminded me of myself at her age, capable, driven, undervalued by her family. "My family expects me to fund my siblings' education while dismissing my career," she said. "They say I'm selfish for wanting to save for my own future. I saw your story, and it helped me understand I'm not crazy, I'm not selfish, I'm being exploited." I shared my story with her, not all of it, but enough. Enough that she understood the pattern, the progression, the cost of silence. "Your worth isn't measured by how much you give up," I told her. "Your family's inability to value you doesn't diminish your actual value, and speaking truth about mistreatment isn't betrayal. Silence is the betrayal. Betrayal of yourself." She cried, not from sadness but from recognition. Someone finally saw her pattern, named it, gave her permission to choose differently. Later that month, I recorded a video for a professional development series about work-life boundaries. I sat in my home office, looking into the camera, and spoke from a place of hard-won wisdom. "People ask if I regret the confrontation," I said. "Here's the truth. I regret the years I spent believing that love required endless sacrifice without reciprocity. I regret not establishing boundaries sooner. I regret letting useless become a word I accepted as accurate. But I don't regret reclaiming my dignity. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And it feels like breathing after nearly drowning." I continued, "If you're watching this, and you're the family ATM, the invisible child, the one whose achievements are footnotes to someone else's story, hear me. Your worth isn't measured by your usefulness to others. Love doesn't require you to disappear. And telling the truth about exploitation isn't destroying the family. Exploitation already did that. Truth just makes it visible." The video was viewed over 100,000 times. The comments were full of people sharing their own moments of choosing themselves, of setting boundaries, of learning that self-respect sometimes means losing relationships that were built on your diminishment. 1 year after the party, I had everything I'd been told I'd never have without my family's support. A home I owned, financial stability, professional success, meaningful relationships. I'd built it all despite them, proving that their exploitation was never necessary for my survival, only for their comfort. I sat in my townhouse office, sunlight streaming through windows I'd chosen, working on client files at a desk I'd bought, in a space I'd earned without sacrifice or manipulation. On my wall, my partnership announcement, not hidden or minimized, but displayed with the pride it deserved. My CPA certification. A photo of me speaking at a conference mid-sentence, looking confident and clear. I wasn't perfect. I still struggled sometimes with guilt, with wondering if I'd been too harsh, but mostly, I felt free. My phone chimed. The monthly payment notification, $1,500 from my parents. I glanced at it, acknowledged it, moved on with my day. The money no longer had power over me. It was just a number now, not a measure of my worth. That evening, Michael came over for dinner. We cooked together in my small kitchen, talking about our days, sharing stories, existing in easy companionship. He never asked about my family. He understood that some relationships end for good reasons, and that's okay. After dinner, I sat on my small patio with a glass of wine, looking at the garden I'd planted. Tomatoes, herbs, flowers I'd chosen because they were beautiful. My space, my choices, my life. I thought about the little girl who'd won a math competition and been ignored, the teenager whose scholarship was dismissed, the woman who'd given nearly $200,000 and been called useless. And I thought about the woman I'd become, the one who finally said enough. They called me useless in front of everyone. They didn't expect my response. But the real surprise wasn't what I said. It was what I finally understood. My usefulness to them required my silence about their exploitation. The moment I spoke, when I became useless to their narrative but invaluable to myself, and that trade, worth every relationship it cost, because I didn't just lose a family that exploited me. I gained myself, my voice, my boundaries, my worth untethered from their valuation. I built a life where silence is a choice, not a requirement, where being called useless revealed more about them than it ever did about me, where my worth is inherent, not transactional. I'm 39 years old. I own a home. I have meaningful relationships. I help others escape the exploitation I endured. I sleep peacefully, unburdened by guilt that was never mine to carry. And when I look in the mirror, I see someone I'm proud of. Someone who chose dignity over approval. Someone who stopped being useful to people who never valued her and became invaluable to herself. That's the real story. Not revenge, not vindication. Just a woman who finally understood that family is supposed to add to your life, not subtract from it. And if telling that truth makes me useless to them, I'll take being useless to their exploitation over being useful to my own destruction. Every single time.